So, but without any further ado, I'd love to turn it over to you, Sal, for a few moments, if you wanted to just sort of lay out a couple of minutes of your thinking in terms of the digital agenda, online learning agenda, and I know that you've been noted, Time Magazine and all these other 60 Minutes as being one of the leaders in the world in terms of digital learning in particular. Where do you see the future of what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'll give a little background, and I'm guessing some of y'all have a little bit of it. As y'all know, this whole Khan Academy project started somewhat happenstance. My previous life was in software and then in finance, and I start tutoring cousins remotely. Word gets around in the family that free tutoring is going on, so then I find myself tutoring many cousins. Then I start working on some software, and that was the first thing that I ever called Khan Academy. It didn't involve videos. To give my cousins practice and for me as their tutor to understand what their strengths and weaknesses were. And then I really made the videos as a supplement to those, and those took on a life of their own, and it became clear that people who were not my cousins were starting to watch it. And you fast forward, it just got more and more traction all the way to 2009. This was when I quit my job. And then in 2010, when some of our first supporters kind of reached out, and Sean was one of our early supporters, my argument was, well, our mission statement as a not-for-profit is a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And to me, that's not just about video. Video is helpful if you need a little micro explanation, but to really learn something, you really need to be able to interact with the material. You really need a teacher in your life, and so we need to arm the teachers with as much data as possible and actionable data. And we need to rethink of how we can use the physical classroom. And so as soon as we got our first major support, we started investing heavily in the software part of Khan Academy. What's happened over the last 4 years is beyond just the site growing and being used by more and more people. We're now at about 10 million students every month. We've now essentially exhaustively are covering kindergarten through college level calculus. Our goal over the next year is to start thinking about physics, chemistry. We already have fairly exhaustive video libraries in those domains, but we want to make sure our interactive exercise library, and it's not just kind of math worksheets, or it's not just exercise worksheets, it's really trying to adapt to the needs of the student. So where the student is, it'll give them a pretest, it'll build a statistical model based on what the student knows and doesn't know, and then it will try to push the student along their learning curve using game mechanics, using machine learning, we're always reading the latest literature and education research to figure out what types of experiments we can run to improve the experience. And so over the next few years, hopefully, more and more people get exposed to Khan Academy. We're translating into all of the world's major languages. Hopefully the content gets broader and also gets deeper. We start having simulations. We just launched a partnership with NASA on space exploration and missions to Mars, but all within the context of kind of a science, technology, math education. We're probably going to start exploring things like reading comprehension over the next 18 months or so. And I caught a little bit of the last conversation. I think the panelists were exactly spot on. I've never viewed Khan Academy as somehow a replacement for a physical teacher. In my mind, I've always viewed this as something that could liberate what happens inside of a classroom, so that a classroom is no longer about information delivery, and it's much more about interacting with the material, having mentorship from your teacher and from your fellow peers. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting things going on at Khan Academy, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to catalyze some of this conversation.
So Sal, you sort of briefly laid out some quite incredible statistics, like, oh yeah, 10 million students a month are using Khan Academy, and most of those are actually learning directly from you. But it's not just your videos that are up there, and your obviously it's the whole software system that people are using to do problem sets and whatnot. There's also other people who are now doing the curriculum as part of the Khan Academy. Other what would you say, other mentors or other teachers, other professors in the Khan Academy. Where is that now, and how inclusive do you think the Khan Academy will be in introducing more and more topics and more professors going forward?
Yeah, this has been an interesting question from the get-go. When I first started working on this as a hobby, I immediately assumed that this was going to be, well, this will be a platform, and let's get hundreds, if not thousands, of other teachers to produce content, et cetera, et cetera. And back in the day, I did try to recruit folks, and it was probably just because it was a small project, it was very hard. But the more and more we've moved forward, we realize that yes, we definitely want to bring in more people producing video content. But we have to be very, very careful, because we realize one of the reasons why a lot of people are coming to us and the word of mouth isn't because they're saying, hey, okay, there's going to be 100 different lectures. It's because there is a certain brand association. There's a certain trust that develops with the site. And so we're trying to play a middle ground where we can discover talent. And our art history content is made by two amazing art historians that we just discovered. And we did a not-for-profit acquisition. Essentially, we gave them jobs, and we have another gentleman who's helped doing the content with NASA. We have partnerships with the Getty, the Museum of Modern Art. We have partnerships with Stanford Medical School. So we're going to continue to add video content. On the exercise content, that's where we've been able to bring many, many more folks in. On the K through calculus content, we've had about 100 educators and researchers and professors help write and vet our content. Our calculus content is being done in conjunction with the faculty of probably the top high school in the U.S. So we are, and obviously now we have this partnership with the College Board in the U.S. They're the folks who administer the SAT. They are going to also help vet and make sure that our content is as good as possible.
Thank you. Sal, just wondering, I've been very, very fortunate to travel around Ireland over the last 6 months since Sean and I launched Mathletes in Shannon. Very fortunate to meet extraordinary teachers, extraordinary students using Khan Academy for the first time. And my, I suppose, very, very limited knowledge of Khan 6 months ago was that it was a series of videos. I did not realize at that point in time you had created a whole learning ecosystem that children and teachers could go visit and go live in to access a whole new learning opportunity. I have seen some wonderful things in classrooms around this country. I've seen a young boy up in Castlebar named Ibrahim who has spent 90 hours on Khan Academy outside of school time. I've seen one young boy from our travelling community here in Ireland who lives in a home that has no broadband, has no computer, and drags his dad every Saturday morning to Castlebar Library to spend 2 hours on Khan Academy. I've seen a two-teacher school way up in the north coast of Ireland in Donegal excelling in Khan. I've seen 500 student schools on the suburbs of Dublin excelling in Khan. Kelly got an email from a teacher just 2 days ago to say that one of his students, a girl who had been mid-table in terms of her mathematical achievement in school, had excelled in Khan and had now, at the end of year school test, had gone from being 10th in the class to 1st in the class. There's something really, really special going on here. Children asking, when are we starting algebra? Teacher, can we stay on late at school and do more maths? Kids that normally, and we're all kids, we all can remember going home in Easter holidays, grabbing our school bag and throwing it in the corner, see you in 2 weeks' time. Kids staying on Khan all during their Easter holidays. What's so special? Why is that happening? I haven't quite yet identified what it is yet that inspires children to take learning from outside the formal boundary of the classroom, to take it home with them, to take it on the school bus while they're on the way home, to do it with their friends over the weekend. What is that special sauce that you have, and why is it working so well?
Well, thank you, and I have to thank both of you for and everyone else involved in the Mathletes Challenge, because I will say that is something that we haven't done in the States, and it's an example of the type of grassroots community effort that we hope to emulate here in the States. And to hear some of those stories, and we get letters all the time, but to hear you talk about them, that's what kind of gets us up in the morning to come do what we do. For me, it's. And you're exactly right. When you're describing all of these, maybe the videos played a small role, but it's really been the exercise platform, the ability for students to work at their own pace, to master concepts and the game mechanics and all of that. And, the idea of what the software part of Khan Academy is not a new idea. As soon as the computer existed, people always said, hey, as Steve Jobs famously said, the PC is going to be the treadmill for the mind. And you've had folks work on this idea of adaptive, self-paced learning. If I were to guess what's allowing you to observe what you just observed is a lot of the pieces are finally coming together. Hopefully on our side, we're making good content. It's engaging. The game mechanics make it fun. It's allowing students to take ownership. But I obviously, we get all the bug reports and everything too. So I have 100 things that I wish I could fix about Khan Academy tomorrow, and hopefully we're going to fix them over the next year, and even incorporate many of the ideas that y'all have seen in the Mathletes Challenge that y'all have been doing outside of Khan Academy. We hope to incorporate that, more of a sense of community, a sense of team spirit, and things like that. But yeah, I personally think that it's just tapping into something that's very fundamental for humans. I think all humans at the age of 4 or 5 years old are incredibly self-directed. I have a 5-year-old at home. I have a 3-year-old at home, and you have to fight them to not explore something. You have to fight them to keep from learning. And then if they go to a traditional school model in 1st, 2nd grade, they're rewarded for being passive. They're rewarded for sitting quietly and doing what they're told to do. And I think part of what it is now they have agency again. They're allowed to take ownership of their learning. They're allowed to pick what they want, and there's no embarrassment. They could be sitting next to a student who is working on a different skill. They're working on a skill that they might have forgotten from a few years ago. No embarrassment. They don't have to walk up in front of the board, in front of the whole classroom, and be humiliated in some way. And so I think it's self-directed. It's customized to where you are. Obviously, you have all of the game mechanics, and we're learning a ton from, the gaming industry has perfected how to make something compelling. So if we can even just take, 10% of that into mathematics, that would be an incredible thing. And, one thing that I'm really excited about is one of the classrooms in the States that has really done well, and it sounds like this is happening there as well. When the students become self-directed like this, it doesn't just help their math scores, it'll help every other subject they do, and frankly, that's the most important skill leaving school. It's great to be able to factor a polynomial, but to actually learn at your own pace is a pretty powerful skill.
So that's pretty powerful stuff, Sal. What do you think when you talk about the adoption of Khan Academy into schools? There are, I'm sure, some examples of best practices in the States of classrooms, school districts, school systems, even state governments that are looking at or embarking on, the flipped classroom concept and embedding it. What do you think is a best practice approach or the biggest measures of success of a school in using the Khan Academy in the state of the art now in 2014?
Yeah, and this is, we're still in process of really trying to figure out, what's the secret sauce of the classrooms that are doing this really well. There seems to be a couple of trends. One is that the teachers really perceive themselves not as the disseminator of information. They don't put their pride as a teacher in giving the lecture, but as that guide and that coach. And the teacher focuses most of their time on really kind of metacognitive interventions, that they start the day thinking about what is perseverance, what is grit. They'll talk to the kids about it. They'll make them think about these things, and then they'll reward that type of thing. And so the teachers are really good at always reminding the students about how to take ownership of their learning, reminding the students that, hey, you're the one in the driver's seat. I'm just here to help you. I'm not here to, test you. I'm not here to push you. And creating a culture within the classroom where it's a culture where it's not just, the teacher is a coach, but everyone in the room is a teacher and a learner. And so, consistently when we've seen that, we've seen some pretty amazing things happen.
Mathletes reached out to 3,000 students in Ireland this year within a very, very short time frame, and that was an extraordinary success for its first iteration. We're going to do Mathletes again, Sean, aren't we?
I hope so.
Yeah, okay.
Is anyone signed up? Anyone want to do Mathletes again out there? Yeah, a couple. Yeah, that's good. Woo! We got about, I don't know, how many people are out here? 400?
About 400, yeah.
About 400 people listening to it. It's not just you, it's not just the two of us.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. He can't see you.
Yeah. And there are a number online as well watching on Excited TV. But perhaps one of the barriers to more young people and more teachers getting involved is teachers somewhat reticent about engaging in this learning opportunity for the very, very first time. Perhaps you're already doing it. I don't know, and if you aren't, I would ask, is it possible, alongside the Khan Academy system for young people, to include some teacher training at some point on your site? So if that teacher is that first person, really, really courageous, wants to get involved, has seen how successful it has been in other Irish schools, is there a place they can go to on your site to say, how do I begin? How do I make that first step on that journey?
Yeah, and we have, I guess you could say, a version of what you're describing, where you go, and we call it our teacher toolkit, and you can get videos of and articles about how classrooms have used it, and their interviews with the teachers. You see videos of the classroom to give you an idea of things. And we would love, the more, if y'all see some classrooms, if y'all could help document it in Ireland, we would love to also put that on the site. We also have some teacher workshops, and we've made online versions of them. And, you know, so that still is kind of a self-service thing for the teachers. The teachers have to some degree be fairly self-directed in order to pull that and to try it out in their classroom. But yeah, that's our goal. And this is something that we're always, this is an open question at Khan Academy, where, you know, we're a small organization. We don't have the means to send a trainer to every school district in America or on the globe. And so how do we create a grassroots effort? And we have some ideas, and I think y'all have some incredible ideas here too. And to some degree, y'all are ahead of us in Ireland, where you identify really good best practices and then allow those teachers potentially to become the local expert on it, and then they can spread those practices.
You have you mentioned you have a lot of bugs, I'm sure, in every software platform to fix. But where do you see the next overall priorities for the Khan Academy in terms of either your software or really the implementations that you are putting in place? Where do you see that being?
So, you know, some of our biggest priorities going into especially this next school year are, how do we just you know, now that our content's fairly exhaustive, and we're obviously continuing to iterate on that and hopefully make that better and better, but how do we make this just as engaging as possible? You know, y'all cited some students who are spending, you know, 90 hours or going on the weekend, but unfortunately that's still, you know, the students who really get immersed in it is still a minority of students. And so how do we make that a majority of students? You know, don't even have to be told to do it. They have a kind of a positive addiction to learning more and more math, mastering more math. So we're working on engagement. We're always running experiments on the site. Some of them are focused around these ideas of grit and perseverance and growth mindset. You can do these interventions that there's a lot of research that, you know, these growth mindset interventions can increase engagement in a physical classroom. And so we've been testing them online. And these are things like just telling a student that your brain is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Or you actually learn when you get a problem wrong. That when you get a problem right, very little happens in your brain. When you get a problem wrong, that's when your brain actually grows. And we're actually seeing, when we tell students like that sporadically, they actually spend more time on the site. They're more likely to keep engaged even when they get a question wrong. So we're testing things like that. I think social functionality is going to be really interesting. It has to be a nice balance. You know, we're obviously not Facebook. Not everyone wants to share every question that they got right or wrong, and obviously privacy is a major issue here. But if we can create some fun cohort effects here, if we can create a healthy sense of competition, so things like what y'all have done with the Mathletes competition, and if we can do it on a more systemic scale, I think that could be exciting. Mobile is an area that, you know, right now 15% of our usage comes through mobile devices, but in 2 or 3 years, it's probably going to be 90%. And so, you know, we have to become, you know, not just a web thing that has a mobile offering, but probably a mobile organization that has a web offering.
Yes, that's interesting, because a number of the children that I met traveling around the country on the Mathletes tour asked me that question, you know, is it possible that I can continue? And as far as they're concerned, they were playing a game. Can I continue playing the game on my mobile? And I think that would be certainly an important part of the evolution of Khan in the future.
Absolutely.
You know, Mathletes for us was an experiment in trying to sort of effectively pull the Khan Academy, you know, through the system in a way, from the bottom going to the top. If you're thinking the reverse way, you know, how does it normally work, you know, when it's a top-down approach, when you're working with the educational infrastructure, when you're working with the departments of education in various states or countries, what could Ireland as a country do to better engage this process in trying to, elevate this in our classrooms? Or is the better approach really just to be pulling it through the system like Mathletes has done? It's pushing a wet noodle doesn't work too well. Pulling a wet noodle can actually get it into your mouth, I guess. But I'm mixing all my metaphors here, but I think you get the idea. But what would you say, is the best practice really in terms of educational infrastructure? What can the educational infrastructure do to help encourage the use of this kind of approach?
Yeah, and we're still learning. Our instincts say, there are a few ministers of education and governors and folks like that who obviously, they really liked it. Many times their children used Khan Academies like, hey, I want to extend this to everyone in our state. But we always shy away from it being forced on teachers or forced on classrooms, because I think that's the best way for you to have very negative stories of it. Because if someone really doesn't believe in it, any tool can be used in a really good way or in a not so good way. And so at least at this stage, we think that would not be healthy. What we tell folks at the government level is, at minimum, help build awareness. And I think this is true globally, is that right now Khan Academy has very high penetration, very high awareness amongst people with college educations, people who are living in the suburbs, middle class and more affluent families. But the people who really need it have very little awareness of it. And so, this seems like a very easy thing that many politicians could do, is let people know, let your constituents know that this thing exists. And then on top of that, help build out the infrastructure so that people have access, not just to Khan Academy, but the entire internet. My hope, I think 10 years ago, and even today, people are rightfully skeptical about, hey, should we just throw more laptops or more tablets into a classroom? What's really going to happen? And people have had that question, since all of us were in school. I remember in the 80s, there was a computer lab, but no one really used it. And it was, was that a good use of resources? And hopefully tools like Khan Academy are now a catalyst saying, no, this is what you can do with it at minimum. At minimum, it's going to change how it could really transform what happens in the math classroom, and then over time, physics, chemistry, other things. And then it's also obviously this general purpose tool that could be used. The students can spend time searching the web and learning on a million different dimensions. So I think those are the two things. Make sure that there's awareness of it, and hopefully there's the technology infrastructure and the internet infrastructure so that people can access it in schools, and hopefully ways to access it in the house too. So I don't know whether it's working with the telecom companies to providing a lower cost internet in the house or whatever else it might be. But those are the types of things that would really set it up well for success, I think.
I'm going to ask if anyone actually has any questions and wants to write it down and just put it up at our feed. Maybe we could have some audience questions, or an audience mic or something like that. And just while that's going on, of the 10 million students a month that are using the Khan Academy, how many would you say are doing it themselves versus in a classroom environment? Would you have any idea of the proportions?
Yeah, so as the best as we can tell, the way that we, looking at our data, can tell the difference is, if someone has a coach and that coach has more than 10 students, we're assuming that they are part of a formal program. And so about 1 million of our 10 million are in some type of a formal setting where they have a coach and there's other peers. And then the other 9 million are just independent learners who are trying to learn at their own pace or pick up something before an exam or whatever it might be.
And one other sort of unusual question. In Mathletes, one of the things that surprised me is, even though I thought that, Fingal, I'm sure there's some people here from Fingal, yeah. Unbelievable. I've seen the news reports on Fingal. I've seen the enthusiasm in that classroom. I've seen the activation. Very excited about what happened there. But bizarrely, all of the national champions, all 15 of the national champions, came from every area in the country except for Dublin City. I don't know why that is. They're all from all these counties. Even the one person that won from County Cork or County Dublin was actually an immigrant student, but from County Longford, I guess, originally. So, why is it about, what is it about the countryside? You talk about the country and the rural areas that gets people into math, or is it just there's nothing else to do?
That's fascinating. I never heard that before. Actually, we should analyze it. Actually, in the U.S., Idaho, which is a rural state, has adopted Khan Academy in a pretty intense way. And maybe, and this is complete conjecture here, it is what you're saying, is that there's fewer distractions out there, and they appreciate having access to something that is part of a bigger. When I say distractions, it's not just the urban, but there's fewer programs for them to be a part of, fewer things to be involved in, and so that's why they're getting more engaged.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any correlation or if it's just a one-year effect, but I would say next year with Fingal competing the way that they are and many of the other places that are competing, I'm sure we'll see some national champions from Dublin. But we have some question from the audience.
One lady just down the center here.
Down the center? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Claire Breslin. I just would like to ask Sal Khan to comment on the possible implications for national or state curricula or syllabuses in mathematics.
Yeah, so this is a debate that's happening in a big way in the U.S. right now. I don't know if y'all are familiar, but the U.S. Historically 50 states, and the states had jurisdiction over education. So 50 states had 50 different standards, and recently you've had this Common Core that 46 states in the U.S. have bought into, but it's hugely controversial. A lot of people feel like it's a federal takeover and it's a national curriculum. And I think it's good to draw a distinction between standards and curriculum, and because people get them confused a lot. Standards are, look, we expect a 7th grader to be able to understand what a negative number is. Now, that standard doesn't tell you how you need to teach negative numbers. You could do it through a really fun simulation. You could do it through worksheets. You could do it however. It's not dictating curricula. And so something like the Common Core standards, I'm supportive of it because even it's not a curriculum. And unfortunately, some people view it as a curriculum. And so they'll look at it in a very reductionist way. And they'll say, OK, I'm going to cover standard 1 on the first 3 days of school and standard 2. But that's not what the intention was. The intention was, let's say, set up standards so that we can make sure in the U.S. that a student in Georgia is not falling behind a student in California or Massachusetts, but let's give the teacher the opportunity to decide how he or she wants to teach that standard or that set of standards. And so I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to have standards, but you have to be very careful in that it's not taken too literally and that it's not taken to be a national curricula. I think it's the best things happen where you could have standards just so everyone has a sense of, okay, where should the students be developmentally but that's a floor that, the students should be able to go well beyond that if they're capable of it. You have tools like Khan Academy that students can work at their own pace and also, make sure that they're reaching those standards. And then that combination in the ideal world, and I know this isn't the reality most places, but it's the ideal world, is it completely liberates the teacher to dictate what actually happens on a day-to-day basis. So once again, it could be good, it could be bad. What matters more is how it's implemented.
Have any more questions
from the audience? Just to follow on that, there was something that you said there. Oh, geez, I lost it. Is there any other questions from the audience? Yeah, there's one more. Fingers pointing. Sorry, I can't see with all the lights. That's way over there. Oh, I see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
I guess so, yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
the microphone's coming across.
Yeah.
Just a sec.
Thanks. Yeah, my question relates to, like, we talked all weekend about how content is important and good quality content, and my question really is, how do you think we should best fund that? Because, like I said yesterday, I run a website and we have to pay bills in order to keep that going, and we charge students or ultimately their parents for that. So I'm just wondering, and the question's open to all three of you, how do you think the best way to fund private enterprises making good quality content? What's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, and I don't know if anyone's fully figured that out. There's essentially two models out. There's a kind of set it up as a company, and people essentially pay for the content. There's a model where you put the content out there for free, but there's some type of value-added offering, or maybe some ads or whatever. It commercializes it a bit. Or there's a model that we've fallen into, which is essentially being funded philanthropically, and making the case to education philanthropists that, look, the social return on investment here is large. It's extremely large, and that it's worthwhile to fund this. That education. I consider content creation kind of one aspect of education R&D, which is if you look at globally, education is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And as you compare it to any other industry as a percentage, how much of that revenue goes to R&D? It's trivially small. It's almost non-existent. And so I think folks who can make good content and who can show efficacy and or traction with folks, and that people really are finding value from it, I think any three of those are viable models. And the way that Khan Academy, one thing that I think a lot about is, well, how does Khan Academy, will we always be purely philanthropically funded? Hopefully I can always make that case, but are there other sources of revenue? One thing that we found ourselves falling into is, as we've given things away and people have kind of learned to trust some of the content, it's been building a brand, and then we can leverage that brand to do other things, to have corporate partnerships that in no way commercialize our site, but help those corporations if they want to work on financial literacy, or if they want to get known for healthcare, or whatever else. So I think there's a bunch of different models here, but it's not been completely figured out.
Yeah, and as the question was devoted to three different audiences, Sal's certainly, I think, got a model that's working and works from my perspective as a, part-time philanthropist. We made a commitment several years ago for $5 million to the Khan Academy, and undoubtedly will keep making donations to the Khan Academy just because, and their approaches, because it is so effective. From a philanthropic viewpoint, you look at the efficiency of something and you say, geez, look at what it's doing, look at the traction. That's an extremely good use of funds. I would think the governments themselves would look at what the value of the Khan Academy and other programs. It doesn't, it's not just Sal, obviously, who's doing great content that's out there, but looks at, just to look at how effective it is and say, yeah, we should be throwing some money behind this. I would think it wouldn't necessarily be the role of philanthropy to do that. And I know in Ireland there isn't a tradition of philanthropy in the educational sector like there is in the United States. So that would be a challenge in Ireland, to have to depend on philanthropy as a content producer, in part just because the population's so small, but in part because generally universities are not funded by their alumni here in this country, versus in the U.S. it's commonplace. And anything on your view on the government's role in all of this?
Well, I mean, it's what has happened, I think, over the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 years is emerging opportunity in a number of fronts to collaborate with people like yourselves and Sal, and then also in other areas of education as well. And I think those collaborations can be quite powerful in terms of what they can deliver. But there are also some very, very interesting opportunities opening up here. We have fledgling Irish edtech entrepreneurs in terms of producing content, in terms of producing software, educational aids. I think that needs to be nurtured as well. I think ultimately we will see development and innovation happening in a number of fronts, both from the not-for-profit and from the for-profit sectors. And in my opinion, that innovation is valuable irrespective of what quarter it emanates from. Sal, we are going to say goodbye to you, and we are equally going to say a very sincere thanks to you for joining us in the early morning on the US West Coast. We I suppose by the time we got talking to you in terms of coming to visit us here at Excited in Dublin, your diary was full up, but we're certainly extending the invitation to you now, loud and clear, to join us for Excited next year. You have a whole 12 months to get ready, and we would love to have you here. We'd love to have you here joining in the conversation, what has been a fabulous weekend of energy and enthusiasm here in Dublin Castle.